Some results, Ms. Cavalier. I walked into this room ready to make heads roll. Tell me why I shouldn't. Have you ever been part of a national manhunt? Betsy stared right back into his eyes. I don't think that's a relevant question, he answered dryly. I've run some very important investigations, and I've always gotten results. The robberies have been coming fast, I found myself saying to Pollitt. Obviously, we were starting from nowhere. Here's what we know now. A single man planned the Citibank, First Union, and Chase robberies and murders. We know he's selecting crew members that are willing to kill. He's only interested in recruiting killers. Our profile tells us he's a white male between 35 and 50. He's probably well-educated, with a thorough knowledge of banks and their security systems. He may have worked for a financial institution in the past, or even more than one, and might have a grudge against them. He robs banks for money, but the murders are probably for revenge. That we're not sure about yet. I looked around the room. Everyone was listening. A few days ago, we located and questioned a man named Tony Brophy. He was recruited for one of the jobs, but was turned down. He wasn't cold-blooded enough. He wasn't a killer. Betsy spoke. We know that he calls himself the Mastermind. There's been a lot of progress in a relatively short time. Pollitt turned to the FBI director and nodded curtly. I'm not satisfied, but at least I finally got a few answers. It's your job to get this Mastermind, Ron. Do it. I spent the next couple of hours at the hospital with Jenny. Around 1 o'clock, I went over to the crisis center at the FBI field office on 4th. I knew we'd be working late. A conference room had been commandeered on the 3rd floor. More than 100 agents were working out of there. Also, about 60 detectives from D.C. and the surrounding areas. We had a few more suspects up on the walls now. They were all bank robbers with the skills and experience to pull off big jobs. I studied the list and made notes on a few of them. Mitchell Brand was a suspect in several unsolved robberies in and around D.C. Stephen Schnurmacher was the person behind at least 2 successful bank heists in the Philadelphia area. Jimmy Dowd was a bartender in Boston who'd never been caught, but who had robbed dozens of banks up in New England. Victor Kenyon had been concentrating his efforts in Central Florida. Everything about the long session on 4th Avenue was intense and intensely frustrating. I made some calls about the suspects, particularly Mitchell Brand, since he worked out of D.C. It was nearly 11:30 when I looked at my watch for the first time all night. Betsy Cavalier and I hadn't gotten the chance to talk since I'd arrived that afternoon. I drifted her way to say good night before I left the building. She was still going at it. She was talking to a couple of agents, but gestured for me to wait. Finally, she walked over. Metro has a couple of leads on Mitchell Brand, I told her. He's violent enough to be involved in something like this. Suddenly, she yawned. Longest day of my life. Phew. How's Johnny doing? She asked. I was surprised and also pleased by the question. Oh, she's doing good. Great, actually. Hopefully she'll come home soon. Alex, she said, let's go have a drink. This is a shot in the dark, but I get the feeling that you need to talk to somebody. Why don't you talk to me? I must admit, the offer completely caught me off guard. I stammered out a response. I'd like to, but not tonight. I have to go home. Rain check? Sure, I understand. Rain check, she said, but not before a look of hurt passed over her face.
This was the place, the time, the opportunity. The Renaissance Mayflower Hotel on Connecticut Avenue near 17th. It was busy as ever that morning, busy and important looking. The Mayflower has been the site of every presidential inaugural ball since Calvin Coolidge. It was a popular place for corporate conferences and board of directors meetings. That was how the Mastermind had come to choose it. A blue and gold chartered tour bus had been waiting in front of the Mayflowers since a little before 9. It was scheduled to leave at 9:30 and would be making scheduled stops at the Kennedy Center, the White House, the Lincoln and Vietnam Memorials, the Smithsonian Institution, and other favorite tourist spots around Washington. The bus company was called Washington on Wheels. The corporate group on board was from the Metro Hartford Corporation. 16 women and 2 children were on the bus when the driver, Joseph Denyo, finally shut the door at 9:40. "All aboard for various museums, historic sites, and lunch," he announced into his microphone. The tour bus proceeded down the driveway of the hotel at a leisurely pace, then turned onto Connecticut Avenue. A few minutes later, the bus turned onto Oliver, which was a residential street. It was a shortcut drivers often took from the Mayflower. A dark blue Chevy van backed out of a driveway about halfway down the block. The van's driver obviously didn't see the bus, but the bus driver saw the Chevy. He braked smoothly and stopped in the middle of the street. 2 masked men suddenly appeared from behind a high hedge. One of them stepped directly in front of the tour bus. The other thrust an automatic weapon inside the open side window, inches from the driver's head. "Open the door or you're dead, Joseph," he shouted at the driver. "No one gets hurt if you obey. You have 3 seconds to follow directions. 1. "It's open, it's open," Denyo said in a high-pitched, very frightened voice. "Take it easy." Several of the wives stopped in the middle of their conversations and peered up toward the front of the bus. The armed, masked man boarded the bus. He held a Walther double-automatic pointed at them. Some of the passengers began to scream. The masked man shouted out, "This is a hijacking. We're only interested in getting money from Metro Hartford. I promise you, no one will be hurt. I have children, you have children. Let's make sure all of our children get to see us tomorrow morning." The tour bus became strangely silent. Even the small children were quiet. Brian McDougal had the floor, and he immensely enjoyed being the center attraction. "There are a few rules of order. 1, no more screams. 2, nobody cries, not even the kids. 3, nobody yells for help. Okay so far?" The passengers stared open-mouthed at the man with the gun. Another man had climbed onto the bus roof and was changing the alphanumeric indicator, which was the easiest way police aircraft could spot it on the road. "I said, okay so far?" Brian McDougal yelled. The women and children nodded and answered him in muffled voices. "Next piece of business. Everyone with a cell phone, pass it forward, right now. As we all know, the police can track cell phones. Not easily, but it can be done. Anyone still holding a phone when we do body searches will be killed, even if it's a kid. Understood?" The cell phones were hurriedly passed to the front. The gunman threw them outside the bus into the hedges. He then used a small hammer and smashed the bus's 2-way radio beyond repair. "Now everybody, put your heads way down below the level of the windows. Everybody stay very quiet down there. That includes the kids. Put your heads down now, and don't look up again until you're told." The women and the children on the bus obeyed. "Big Joe," the gunman turned and addressed the bus driver. "You have only one instruction. Follow the blue van." There were 3 executive assistants busily answering phones and collecting mail and faxes for the 36 Metro Hartford directors working in the famed Chinese room at the Mayflower Hotel. Sarah Wilson, the youngest assistant, saw the fax from the kidnappers first. She quickly read it, then passed it on to the 2 more senior assistants. Nancy Hall was the executive assistant to the group CEO, John Dooner. She barged into the board meeting without knocking and called clear across the room. "Mr. Dooner, I have to see you right now," she said. The departure of the CEO brought a general lightening of the mood around the room, but the small talk and smiles were short-lived. He was back in less than 5 minutes. His face was pale as he hurriedly walked to the podium. "Time is of the essence," said Dooner in a trembling voice that shocked the other board members. "Please listen carefully. The chartered tour bus carrying my wife and many of your wives has been hijacked. The men responsible claim to be the same sick bastards who've been robbing banks and taking hostages in Maryland and Virginia during the past 2 weeks. They claim that the robberies and murders were committed as object lessons for the people in this boardroom. They want us to know they are deadly serious about their demands being met, and met on time, to the second. The CEO continued. Their demands are simple and clear. They want $30 million to be delivered to them in exactly 5 hours, or all the hostages will be murdered. We don't know how the tour bus was taken. Steve Bolding from our Control Risks group is on his way over here. He's deciding which police agency to involve. It will probably be the FBI. Dooner stopped to take a breath. As you know, we have a kidnapping insurance policy that covers up to $50 million in ransom. I suspect that the kidnappers already know this. I think they know that we are the underwriters on the policy ourselves. Therefore, we can get the money, and we can get it fast.
I was at the FBI field office on 4th Street when we got the emergency call. A Washington on Wheels tour bus with 18 passengers and the driver had been hijacked soon after it left the Renaissance Mayflower Hotel. Minutes later, a $30 million ransom had been demanded from the Metro Hartford Insurance Company. The instructions from the kidnappers stated that the police agencies were not to be involved, but there was no way we could back off and trust them. We set up at the Capitol Hilton, which was close to the Mayflower, on 16th and K. We had 4 mobile command units, in addition to the dozen agents already operating inside the Mayflower. High-tech helicopters, Apaches, were in the air searching for the Washington on Wheels bus. The Apaches had heat monitors for tracking purposes, if and when the kidnappers attempted to hide the bus and its passengers. The alphanumeric indicator on the bus's roof had been given out to aerial police, military, city, state, and even civil aircraft. None of the groups were told why they were looking for the bus. The Capitol Hilton was close enough for us to get to the Mayflower in about 90 seconds if necessary. We hoped it was far enough away so that the crew wouldn't know we were there. We now had exactly 2 hours until the money was to be dropped. Then the job got harder. Jill Abramson from the insurance company's Internal Security Committee and Steve Bolding from the security firm itself arrived at the Hilton. Abramson was a heavy-set woman in a yellow pinstripe business suit. She looked to be in her late 40s. Bolding was tall and in good shape, probably in his early 50s. He had on a blue blazer, white shirt, and jeans. They had come to the Hilton to tell us how to do our jobs. Betsy opened her mouth to speak, but Bolding abruptly waved her off. He had something to say first. "This is how it's going to be. I let you in on this, but I can also shut you right out again. I'm a former SAC with the Bureau, so I know all the right moves, and all the wrong ones. Agent Cavalier, are there any leads on the identity of the unsubs?" "It's 11:46. Our 0 hour is 1:45. Precisely." Betsy took a short breath before she answered Bolding's question. She was keeping her cool better than I would have done with the private security expert. "Suspects, yes, but nothing we can use to help the hostages. A neighbor saw the hijacking of the bus. 2 males were involved. They wore ski-style masks. The bus was spotted on DeSales Street, but we don't know if it was before or after the hostages were taken. It's now 11:46, Mr. Bolding." Ms. Abramson said something that surprised all of us. "We have the money coming to the Mayflower right now. The ransom will be paid." "On schedule," said Bolding. "We're waiting for further instructions from the hijackers. They have been incommunicado since their first contact. Our people will make the drop, and we'll make it alone." Betsy Cavalier finally went off on Bolding. "I listened to you. Now you listen to me, mister. You were an SAC. I am a SAC. I would have been your superior if you had stayed at the Bureau, and I'm your superior now. My people will make the money drop. I'll be there. You won't. That's how it will be done." Both Abramson and Bolding started to argue with her, but Betsy cut them off instantly. "That's enough bullshit out of both of you. Everything will be handled with the full knowledge of how dangerous the hijackers are. If you don't like my terms, then you're out.